Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to our CAPE training program. My name is John Leatherman. I'm located at Kansas State University. My partners in this initiative include Mark Skidmore, who is Director of the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, Rosa Solas McKelvey, who is Communications and Logistics Coordinator with the North Central Regional Center, and Paula Miller, who is our CAPE Postdoctoral Fellow. A number of others have contributed to this and helped us to define and make and design our program here today. CAPE stands for Community Assessment and Education to promote behavioral health planning and evaluation. It's a co-sponsored project that includes important partners, including the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA Regional Rural Development Center Network. Our partnership is intended to identify and disseminate more effective response strategies to the challenges of mental illness and substance abuse that exist within our community. We have two major training objectives with our program. The first is to enhance behavioral health literacy and hopefully reduce the stigma associated with mental health problems that exist within our communities. And we've drawn upon the mental health first aid training program that you've participated in previously to help you to feel more comfortable dealing with topics in and around mental health challenges. Our second major objective is to create and sustain community coalitions to address behavioral health challenges that exist at the local level. And we do so with this training series that deals with the notion of organizing a community scale initiative to deal with local priorities and challenges. And ultimately, we focus our efforts on the notion of community action planning to help guide our efforts going forward. Here in our training program today, we're discussing assessing community preparedness, and we'll focus on identifying the essential leadership that needs to be involved in our community initiative. We'll talk a bit about public relations and address the use of social media for building networks. And finally, we'll wrap up and take a look ahead at what we'll be covering next. When we consider leadership in an initiative, there are different types of leaders and leadership roles. And they're not likely all to be filled by a single individual, or a single individual may assume multiple leadership roles. We need, first of all, someone who can initiate an effort. Someone has to start, and someone needs to do the background homework and map out strategy. Ideally, this is an individual that has some legitimacy in dealing with a given issue and some respect insofar as they are identified as appropriate to undertake such an initiative. This would be an individual, ideally, who would have some passion for that which they are undertaking and are willing to contribute to the effort and remain committed to the effort over the long term. Frequently, this individual is an extension agent. Frequently, we are the ones who are in a position to initiate and organize such an effort. Then what we need is we need some overall leadership for our community work. This ideally would be an individual with very broad perspective of community issues and understanding of community organizations. We perhaps would recognize that there are oftentimes real leaders versus the notion of a symbolic leader. Just an example here in Riley County, Kansas, with our Mental Health Task Force. The chair of the Mental Health Task Force is actually an individual who is on the City Commission, but the real leader behind the initiative and the individual who makes it happen is the Executive Director of the Mental Health, Community Mental Health Services Agency. And so there again, it's appropriate, I think, to have various people in different roles that can lend to the legitimacy and credibility of the initiative. And once again, we might recognize that we may benefit from having a perhaps symbolic leader in charge, but we also need to have someone who can actually undertake the work. Ideally, the individual will be suitably credentialed as being appropriately involved in the issue that we're dealing with, would be a respected individual with some community gravitas, and would be an accessible and articulate individual, and one who, once again, remains committed to the effort underway. Then we need an individual who is actually going to serve as a facilitator for our ongoing initiative. We need to have someone who is willing and able to do the work that's necessary to keep things going forward. This person needs to be situated in an organization where they have access to the resources and can dedicate the time necessary to do the work that's required to keep things going forward. It needs to be an individual who is in a position and willing to make our community effort a priority. In those circumstances where an individual is serving in a facilitator role, where they deal with it as kind of a second thought rather than a priority, things tend not to go as well as those who are committed and willing to stay on top of what needs to be done. Then we need to consider the leaders of the essential stakeholders and our partners in the initiative. After having identified the key organizations and institutions that we need to have involved in our initiative, we want to have participants who are situated within the organization, who have had perhaps sufficient history and longevity in their role to understand something about what's going on within the community. They need to be sort of hierarchically situated in a position where they're able to take some action with some sense of autonomy. And indeed, they need to be open and cooperative. Now, examples that I have witnessed here in Riley County, for example, the Riley County Mental Health Task Force, one of our key partners in that endeavor is the local police department. We have a couple of police captains, the captain in charge of the patrol division, the captain in charge of the jail. These are individuals who see what is going on the street, and they actually are in a position where they're sufficiently ranking that they have a certain level of autonomy to suggest that, yes, we will do this or that, and can make that happen. Similarly, the director of the emergency room at the local hospital. This is an individual who is perhaps authorized to be able to say, yes, the hospital will or won't undertake some initiative, or will or won't provide certain kinds of information. But those are the individuals who we might hope to attract to our initiative. And all of these leaders play a key role in making our network an effective one. Now, next we'll consider sort of the public relations of our initiative. And this I'm relying primarily on your self-study. We've identified some resources for your use. The first is a rather nice little publication from the Work Group for Community Health and Development at the University of Kansas. They've developed something called a community toolbox and have devoted a significant amount of resources to the topic of public relations. And indeed, this is a 150-page publication that I've created from the information resources within the community toolbox, and I think that you will find it to be a very useful reference. Now, just highlighting a couple of the important points found within the Communications to Promote Public Interest publication. They first of all, once again, talk about in initiating some type of a public relations campaign, it all starts once again with an effective plan. And that is a theme that we've sort of repeated time and again. It all starts with thinking about what you're trying to accomplish at the front end. What exactly is your purpose? Who's your audience? What's your message? What communication channels will you use? And how will you distribute your message? Those are things that we need to think about at the front end before we undertake any sort of an initiative. One of the sections that I found to be particularly interesting and useful within the Community Toolbox publication are their discussions of principles of persuasion. Now, a lot of these principles we perhaps have intuited on our own as we've gone about doing our work and incorporated it in our work, but it's very interesting and I think useful to think about these principles as a package as we are trying to essentially encourage people to undertake some sort of an initiative that we might prefer. It begins with knowing your facts and your audience, connecting with your audience, trying to build a relationship with them, utilizing opinion leaders as necessary, making a very strong opening for your argument, getting to the point very, very quickly, offering the benefits and minimizing the costs, asking for clear and simple action steps, have alternatives available, know what your plan B is going to be. Ultimately, we would hope to obtain a commitment right then and there in our interaction with our audience. We'll want to have at the ready models and examples of how this can work within our community. Repeat our message and actions agreed upon at the end of a presentation, offer thanks, and always provide follow-up and keep people informed about your actions and activities. Thereafter, within the publication, they talk quite a little bit about the tools and techniques, and you will recognize these as basic tools that we're all familiar with: press releases, news and feature stories, guest columns, editorials, and so forth. We're not going to talk about each and every one of them. I will leave it to you to sort of look through the publication. I will say that in my own perusal, me having done this job for 30-odd years, of course I know it all, and I actually learned quite a little bit when I read the information that was available, dealing with such basic things as creating newsletters, posters and flyers, brochures. Now, if I learned something about how to be a little bit more effective in creating brochures and fact sheets, and I think you will too. I'll say a few words about social media, and I guess I feel a little out of my league with social media, being an old guy as I am. But I'll tell you, it's a new world, and here I found some statistics from not too terribly long ago about active users worldwide. Facebook claims some 1.7 billion users worldwide, and you can see this list of the most accessed and utilized types of social media. I have used a couple of these things. I do have a Facebook account, but you won't find anything there. I had to create the account just to see what the thing was. Yes, I've used Skype, and yes, I allowed myself to get involved with LinkedIn, and most of the rest of this I don't even recognize. But I'll tell you, a lot of people do, and I think that that is very, very powerfully illustrated by what we've just seen happening in our own national elections, where social media had just a tremendous influence, and I think one that many, many of us underestimated as the election took place. Social media, according to Wikipedia, the most common use of the internet today. And I found some statistics that were a little older, but Nielsen, the folks who look at media usage, essentially estimated, measured that the amount of time people in the United States are utilizing social media literally doubled within the course of a 12-month period. That is the rapidity of the growth that we see in the use of social media. For younger people, those who are under 25, what's their most common source for news? It's Twitter. And that's according to my wife, the journalism professor. It's kind of interesting. She asks her intro class where they get, what's their primary source of news, and of course the kids say the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and then somebody sheepishly says Twitter, and before you know it, half the kids said Twitter, and then my wife asks, who's lying? And it's the kids who are saying the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and CNN. They all get their news from Twitter. So, what are we to make of this? Well, once again, I've actually found some useful resource material. I'll actually credit Paula Miller with coming up with this. It comes from the Center for Disease Control, CDC Social Media Works. And this is a very, very helpful publication, I think, in terms of guiding some of our thoughts and ideas with regard to the use of social media within our community and public relations campaigns. And this is essentially sort of their introduction to the use of social media for health-related communication. And but at the website, they have just a tremendous host of tools that are available that will allow you to build your social media campaign right online, utilizing the tools that are available at the CDC's website. And in this particular publication, they talk about such things as getting started, setting up your initiative, identifying your goals and objectives, identifying your audience, your content, the resources that are needed, social media best practices. You can take a look at the publication and read more about that on your own. But I think that very, very importantly, they address each and every one of these types of social media, blogs, community groups and forums, electronic newsletters, mobile apps, LinkedIn, YouTube, and so forth, and have identified best practices for each and every one of these individual types of social media. I think that you will find that to be a very useful resource. And I myself have to wonder, if I were perhaps a little bit younger and more technically savvy, what I might have been able to do with some of these tools. Hopefully you are in a position where you can make more effective use of these tools because they are powerful. Just in general, to sort of summarize what I have taken from the CDC publication, is this notion of utilizing social media to help build community networks. Sort of the traditional educational model that I have practiced over the majority of my career and entails sort of a one-way communication flow, whereas social media is really a communication flow among a network. And indeed, it can serve as a network building tool. It's very immediate, occurring in the real time. And really, it is very, very important for you or we as an initiator behind some sort of a social media campaign is to listen. Listen to what people are saying. And ultimately, what we would hope to do in terms of contributing to the network would be to be responsive to what people are saying, be authentic in our responses, be transparent and respectful of what people are saying. And those are some of the keys to building an effective social media campaign. So here to wrap up our discussion today, Looking ahead, we've got a couple of additional videos in our community development series, and what we're going to talk about next time is the idea of engaging the community and ultimately building consensus around the priorities that we would establish in relation to behavioral health needs. From there, we will have a webinar where we can discuss everything that we've been talking about in our video series and take a look ahead at the development of your community strategic action plans. And from there, we'll actually see what you hope to accomplish within your own community. Finally, contact information for folks associated with the program. You can reach me at this telephone number and email address. I'm more than happy to discuss with you your thoughts and plans with regard to the development of a community action plan, and will assist you where I can. You can also contact Mark Skidmore, the project director for our CAPE training program, and Rosa Solis McKelvey, should you have some questions with regard to any of the logistics of our communication in relation to our CAPE training program. So with that, I'll sign off for now, and we'll look forward to visiting with you again in our next video as we discuss building community consensus. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.